I'm going to throw now to our next presentation, which will be co-delivered by Dr. Sam Arnold and Julianne Higgins. Now, Sam's an Autism CRC researcher and who works closely, based at the University of New South Wales, so UNSW, as a postdoctoral research fellow in the School of Psychiatry. Julianne's an autistic advisor and peer researcher who works closely with Sam on the longitudinal study of Australian adults on the spectrum. So we'll be talking about another longitudinal study here of adults who are a little bit older than school leavers. So Sam and Julianne will be outlining some of the inclusive research practices used in this study and how the study itself has evolved over time because of input from autistic advisors. Over to you, Sam and Julianne.
Great. Thank you, everyone who's tuned in or downloaded the webinar. My name is Sam, and I hope that technology is working for us, and hopefully you can see our slides. I work on the ALSAA study, and I'm going to be co-presenting with Julianne, who's a peer researcher and autistic adult who's had longer involvement in the ALSAA and be highlighting its history and the inclusive research and co-production approaches. I'm going to start with a brief introduction to the ALSAA. So the ALSAA is the sister study to the SASLA that Beck told you about. It's a longitudinal study with a 2-year follow-up. This means that every 2 years, we ask our participants to complete a new questionnaire. We have both online and hard copy versions of the survey, though most people complete it online. We only include people aged 25 plus years old in this study, as our focus is on adulthood and not so much the transition to adulthood, which is the focus of the SASLA. There is no upper age limit on our study, unlike much autism research. Our oldest self-reporting participant is 80 years old, and one of our carer respondents provides care to a 96-year-old autistic adult. The ALSAA gathers data from autistic and non-autistic adults, as well as family members or carers. We also have an informant report version of the survey. If an autistic person is unable or does not want to complete the survey themselves, a close relative, for example, a partner or parent, can complete the survey about them on their behalf. And last on this slide, it's not too late to join in the ALSAA. We are doing what is called rolling recruitment, so that people can join in at any stage, and I really hope that more people, both autistic and non-autistic, who tune into this webinar might consider signing up at this URL. These two graphs give an insight into the autistic adults in our time on sample. Of the 295 autistic adults, we only had 16 above 65 years old, and would really encourage older autistic adults to participate. There is little research looking at old age in autism, but we need more people participating to do this research well. The second graph shows the gender spread of ALSAA autistic participants. Although our understanding of autism is changing, and the previous assumptions about a 1-to-4 male to female autism ratio are incorrect, we do have a large amount of autistic females in the ALSAA, although this is not that unusual. We know that in general, females complete online survey research more than men, and we have seen this gender skew in other online autism research. It does give us an opportunity to explore the characteristics of autistic females, which is another area that is under-researched. And there's also a significant proportion of non-binary and gender-diverse autistic participants. This slide is to give you an overview of the many areas that ALSAA covers, and then some of the examples of the measures that we include in that domain. Now, apologies for the small font, and I'm not going to read the entire list, and we haven't even included all the measures we would use, otherwise it'd be just too much to fit on one slide. The full list of measures should be published soon, but hopefully from this slide you can see that the ALSAA covers many different areas, from health, emotional health, to relationships and participation, and importantly, service usage. Lastly, we use a few measures specific to carers of autistic adults. Hopefully from that brief introduction you have a bit of an idea as to what the Autism CRC ALSAA study is. For the rest of the presentation, we're going to touch on the history of the ALSAA and the importance we place in using inclusive research methodologies, and bring this home by giving an example of a loneliness study we have completed that dramatically changed its direction based on the input of our autistic advisors. In regards to inclusive research, the ALSAA primarily uses a consultative approach, drawing on a group currently composed of 8 autistic adults and 1 carer of an autistic adult. Our advisors critique our interpretations of the study findings. They advise on future topic areas and survey design. We're moving towards greater involvement of our advisors from earlier in the output design and doing peer research projects in addition to consultative projects. Working with the ALSAAs, we co-developed an inclusive research protocol that outlines how we aim for collaboration between the researchers and advisors. Unfortunately, given time constraints, I won't go through this protocol in detail today, though we hope to have it published in full and publicly available soon. A few brief comments on this. I think overall it's very important to be as considerate and autism friendly as possible, being very clear about expectations and open to the heterogeneity of autistic people and their differing preferences, particularly in terms of communication styles. It's important also that feedback is provided to autistic advisors as to what aspects of their advice influenced the research or reasons it didn't, and an acknowledgement of the autistic advisors in any output that they have contributed to. This protocol has evolved from working with our autistic advisors and helps both the researchers and advisors to understand their working relationship, though we are further evolving towards even more inclusive and peer research approaches. And so I think at this point it's good to pass to Julianne to share some of her history and the history of the ALSAA and this ongoing evolution of inclusive approaches. Julianne, can you tell us about your history with the Autism CRC and the ALSAA?
I was diagnosed 10 years ago, and in 2014, I contacted Professor Sylvia Roger at Autism CRC, asking for guidance to locating research into the neurology of autism. What I had read mentioned the lack of neural connections as deficits, yet didn't give an interpretation of greater connections in other areas of the brain. I wondered what these actually signified in autistic people. I was on a quest to understand. Sylvia and Dr. Kate Van Doren asked me to work on a charter, which became instead an advisory piece on attitudinal and practical concerns for providing autistics with safe and quality healthcare. I'd contributed to writing volumes 1 and 2 of the Inclusive Research Practice Guides and Checklists for Autism Research, and was invited by Sylvia to be the lay autistic advisor for setting up the first Research Academy workshop in 2015. At the same time, I was working with Kitty Rose Foley at University of New South Wales on the ALSAA, on Kate Van Doren's recommendation. I, with other autistic advisors, were asked to give feedback on a comprehensive range of standardised measures and topic areas. These tools would have been devised and designed by non-autistic academics with a non-autistic population in mind. As you may appreciate, this brings into question the suitability of applying such tools to an autistic, neurologically different population. I gave feedback as to the suitability of layout, content, font, language, and relevance of these measures. The contributions of autistic advisors were acknowledged in publications and related presentations. When Dr. Kitty Rose gained a lectureship, she recommended my services to Dr. Samuel Arnold, who took over implementing ALSAA from 2017 until the present day. Over the past 2 years, we have seen greater autistic input as peer research has evolved along with ALSAA's inclusive research protocol. The organic development of inclusive peer research and collaboration was seen in designing questions and giving advice on outputs of Wave 2 projects on loneliness, employment, and medication, and hopefully will progress further into Wave 3. Why study autism in adults? This is a huge topic that needs addressing in greater detail, but here for brevity I must confine myself to areas related to the ALSAA. Not only do we know very little about autistic adults, with most research focused on children, that autistic adults can relate their perspectives in ways that autistic children cannot, and thus provide researchers with individual insights into the contexts in which they experience invisible and vacillating difficulties in everyday life. There is concern if non-autistic researchers impute their neurotypical interpretations of behaviours, intentions, psychological and emotional states onto autistic individuals and design interventions based upon these same questionable interpretations. Attitudinal shifts towards desire to learn from autistics, to understand our needs, strengths and quality of experiences in dealing with the invisible barriers negatively affecting daily life, may also benefit the broader population. Let me give you an example focused on environmental suitability to highlight the value of studying autism in adulthood. Take autistic sensory sensitivity to sound and the increase in noise-induced hearing loss in the general population from mid-teens onward. Couple this with decreased concentration span found in working in open-planned workspaces due to distractions, interruptions, noise level, etc. Include classrooms. For autistics, there is also difficulty of being subjected to multiple sensory assaults from odours, bright lights, intrusions, noise, etc. Is it possible to address these issues as part of a general health and productivity plan? Hearing loss is not reversible. Can we broaden the understanding of the potential of Homo sapiens by becoming familiar with and learning from experience of those who differ from the dominant population?
Thanks, Julianne. Let's move on now to a concrete example of our recent loneliness study that leveraged the expertise of autistic advisors. And for context and background, this great figure from our student Dawn depicts the mainstream conceptualization of loneliness. The concept is that loneliness is both a negative feeling of a lack of intimacy combined with the judgment that the feeling is because you have less quality or quantity of relationships than you would like. Loneliness is associated with a lot of negative impacts such as depression, anxiety, and even cardiovascular risk. It is likely that the core characteristics of autism, such as differences in social interaction, could impact on loneliness. There are a few studies on loneliness in autism, and particularly in adulthood, and our work was the first study to use validated measures in a comparison group. Our initial questionnaire quantitative analysis confirmed the higher rates of loneliness for autistic adults in the ALSAA sample. Of interest, quantitatively, we found largely similar associations with loneliness for autistic and non-autistic adults, such as social skills and dissatisfaction with social support, both being associated with loneliness across samples. Based upon these quantitative findings, we made our initial interpretations that what drives loneliness in autistic adults is similar to non-autistic adults, and autistic adults are lonelier as they are more affected by differences in social skills and social support. Therefore, we should aim to improve social skills for autistic adults and facilitate more social support as methods to reduce loneliness. And we sent a lay summary of these initial findings and interpretations to our advisory group for their review. And so now I'm going to pass to Julianne again. Julianne, can you tell us some of the things that you sent back to us once you reviewed our initial findings?
Yes, for autistics, friendships, companions, aloneness, and loneliness are not necessarily the same as seen through typical eyes. As an autistic, I do not require continual contact throughout weeks, months, etc., whereas non-autistics seem to need continual contact, and a lapse in the rhythm of frequency seems to be seen as being rude or a lack of commitment to the relationship. I cannot sustain and maintain regular and frequent contact. I become physically and mentally exhausted. Small talk, chit-chat, and gossip are difficult to impossible for most of us autistics and is very energy sapping. I propose that that autistics and typical people would agree that the greatest intimacy is to be understood.
And the feedback from our advisors had a major impact on our direction in this study. We realized that by just focusing on the quantitative data, we would be overlooking important understandings of loneliness in autism. And by not analyzing the qualitative data, we were in essence ignoring the voice of autistic people on this subject. The advisors' input overall made us change the methodology we were using, moving from a purely quantitative study to a mixed methods approach. They highlighted the importance of neurodiversity in understanding social skills differences, and that finding places where the person is accepted and where they are interested in being, such as common interest groups, was a key consideration for many autistic adults. Importantly, the advisors highlighted the difference between loneliness and a desire to spend time alone. Once we incorporated the qualitative data, we ended up with very different understandings that has set a path for a future program of research in this area. We found many autism-specific barriers to socialization, and that unfortunately past negative experiences has led some adults to no longer have the desire to socialize. Autistic adults highlighted that social interaction can be exhausting. The qualitative data confirmed the advisor's comments, highlighting that the brief ULS-8 loneliness measure that we had used may be problematic for autistic adults. In particular, the item, "I am unhappy being so withdrawn." Autistic adults might like being withdrawn at times, but otherwise are also lonely. Based on our advisor's feedback, we're now gathering data using the full ULS-20 loneliness scale, and we'll be doing further investigations of loneliness, including longitudinal analyses. Considering comments such as "we don't need fixing," overall, we changed our interpretations and conclusions towards an understanding of individual needs in informing support provision, suggesting support personnel need to be sensitive to specific needs and respond accordingly. Also, that we hope the society can be more accepting of differences in social communication. So that brings us to the end of this presentation. Hopefully you can see the critical role that autistic adults have played in the development and outputs arising from the ALSAA. Into the future, inspired by working closely with Julianne, the ALSAA hopes to move beyond having autistic adults as advisors to more outputs where autistic adults are peer researchers, co-researching the topic and involved in all stages and early stages of research projects. One area where this is already happening is we are developing an impacted diagnosis scale and have had heavy involvement of autistic adults in each stage of its development. There are many topic areas we'll be pursuing into the future, given the wide scope of the ALSAA, and just one of these, which is very important and deserves to be mentioned, is an exploration of the barriers to healthcare for autistic adults. Thank you for listening to us give an overview of the ALSAA and its inclusive research approach. A final shameless plug here for recruitment. Sign up to the ALSAA now and complete your survey, and you'll have the chance to win a $200 gift card. We'll be giving away a gift card every 3 months. So not only will you be supporting work aiming to improve the lives of autistic adults, but you'll have a good chance to win a gift card. You only have to be Australian and over 25 years old in order to participate. Both autistic and non-autistic adults are needed. And at this point, Julianne, can I ask, do you have any final comments for us?
Yes, Sam. I'd encourage more of my peers to take advantage of being respected and heard, with the potential of being effective in impacting the understanding of autism. So jump on board, sign up to our project. Thank you.
Julianne. Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you, Sam and Julianne. That was fabulous.